Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, hi, this is Attican, and welcome to another Railway Empire video. This is part 3 of our look at the final, the third scenario in the Crossing the Andes DLC. And in this one, we got off to a great start in part 1 based on our niter business and niter exports. And here we're looking at our niter export, our second niter exports plant mine, and we're going to expand it so that we're making even more money. And we're going to borrow money to make, issue bonds to make sure we've got cash. And I've said this, I don't know how many times, but debt is your friend in this game. Use those bonds. If you can play even mediocre level of play on this game, you can cover that 8% interest, no problem. Get your money now and build something and start making money with it. Don't hold off on your bonds, afraid that you won't be able to afford the interest rate, because you can certainly make enough money to cover 8% of anything if you're playing well. So we're going to expand that thing out and make more and more money, because it can take, really right there is as far as we want to go, level 4. We've got a demand of 7 in Concepcion, and we can get level 4 and do 5.5. If we take it up to level 5, one, it'll cost us a lot of money, $1.5 million to do that, but that's not the problem. The problem is, once you get overproducing on something you're really trying to make money off of, the industry itself, the producing industry, you don't want to overproduce, because then you'll reach the point where you've saturated your market and your industry will stop producing, and the profits will go to zero. And they'll stay there until, the industry kind of creates demand again. Don't do that. Stay exactly. It'd be perfect if we could do exactly 7, but we can't. We can, however, do exactly, we can do 5.5, and we'll just accept that, and we'll make a nice $35,000 profit every month, every week, and that's pretty solid. Now here we've got enough money now. I'm willing to put in maintenance, so we're going to put in maintenance, and the biggest reason I'm putting into maintenance, one, it is good. It's certainly good to have the maintenance and have your engines break down very infrequently out in the field on the line, tying it up. And we're getting that critical mass of stuff. And main thing, the reason I do it, I get tired of all those little yellow triangles all over the place. They're irritating, because sometimes you have to check them to see what's going on. Sometimes I ignore them when I shouldn't. So I'm putting maintenance in, and the way I'm doing it here, and there are different ways to do it, but I'm putting it in every city station and every warehouse, because every line that we run will at some point in their run end up in a city station or a warehouse, and sometimes both. So, you could put them out in the field, in the rural stations, but I'm not going to mess with that. Just have every city station and every warehouse. Now, what will happen here, our economy is cooking right now. We're going to slow down. Our economy is this is a calculated risk, frankly. Our economy is going to slow down because we have maintenance. Now, that may sound counterintuitive, but it's just a fact. We will get a quarter to even maybe 2 quarters of slow money coming in, because we are going to be paying now for the maintenance of a whole bunch of trains that haven't been maintained, and they're all going to tie up the lines, and we're going to get platforms that are busy, and we're going to have trains sitting out there waiting to come in. And when they come in, they're going to dump their load. We'll get a little bit of money. Then we're going to spend that money to maintain that vehicle, and everything's going to grind to a halt for a bit. But the good news is, after we go through that little period, then it's going to pick up and be even better than it was before, because now the trains are going to run smoothly and not have as many breakdowns and da-da-da. So my advice to you is put in your maintenance, but don't do it until later in the scenario when you've got your income going, because when you do it too early, you spend money that you really need to be investing on something else. And I'm really talking about here when you're doing one of these hard scenarios and you want to get a decent score. We're trying to get a president level on a hard scenario. follow that advice on maintenance. Now, when you're just messing around in a sandbox, you put maintenance on right away, and no problem, because there are no limits. It doesn't matter how fast you go, right? So let's move on. What we've got now, we've got our 2 3-city clusters. We've got that one down in the south that's doing great, Santiago and Concepcion and Coquimbo. They are doing great. They've already grown. Then we built our second one up there where we started with Lima and Ica and Cusco. And it's doing just fine too. And we're waiting on it to finish off. But we got a message, partway through it, you get a message saying, hey, now you need to ship 20 steel to Asuncion. Now, Asuncion is way down south from of the territory we can cover. It's as far away as we could get. It's all the way down the south end. And so for now our territory will open up as we go along. But right now, what we have access to, it's as far away as we can get. We've got a nice city there in Cusco that has grown. And what I decided to do was take advantage of that and put in a steel industry in Cusco. Now, an alternative way to play this would be to put a steel industry in one of those small towns out there that hadn't even grown yet. You know, just buy up their meat or buy up their chicha business and put steel there. But then you have a problem because you can't expand the steel mill. And I advise you to put your steel industry in a city that's going to grow for you. And Cusco is part of our 3-city cluster here, so it's going to grow, and we're going to be able to expand our steel industry and produce more and more steel faster and faster. So we're going to put a steel industry in Cusco. We've already got it in there. In fact, I skipped over that part in the video, but we've already got it in there. So now we're going to run coal, and I've looked all over the place, and this is the only real option for the coal, is this very clumsy spot up here on this mountain. But that's kind of typical. It's very realistic. A coal mine would be up in the mountains, and we got to get it down that hill and get it off to where it's needed. And so we'll run a classic line here that's running along the riverbed and running into Cusco, and set it up with supply towers. You can see I've given it its own private line. It's not even sharing the trunk line with anything else. You can see there's pretty heavy traffic on that trunk line. Coming up both city-to-city line from Lima and from the warehouse. So gave it its own line for the coal. And now we'll get really good flow of coal. We're still on the Mikados at this point. So we're going to run Mikados down there for our freight and make sure we're getting plenty of coal into Cusco. And so we can start our steel production. Now we've got to have ore, and we've located this ore quarry, Malone Quarry down here, that produces the iron ore. And you can see it's not too far away. It's not terribly far away, but a lot of mountains in the way. So what we're going to do here, we could go around all those mountains, kind of go to the east of La Paz and go around the mountains and come back up. But we don't want to change elevations like that. And so what we're going to do is take advantage of the fact that we can build cheap bridges. Remember from our last one, we have the ability now to build bridges at a very reasonable price. We've had 2 big discounts on them in our research. And our track actually is even a little cheaper now. So we can build track without spending a fortune. And so what we're doing here is looking at what's the best way to run that ore into Cusco and not have tremendous inclines, but at the same time not spend billions of dollars on it either. So what we're going to do is actually take advantage of that little gap up there. You can see the kind of that lake, and there's a little gap up there that leads up into Cusco. So we're going to run our line so that it goes by that lake and through that gap, and gives us a nice short run in there. And I'm looking at, how can I run this track, and how can I get that done? But I'm also thinking about, well, once I get that done, we've got to start running that steel down to Asuncion. So what we're doing right here is we're going to set up a line that can run all the way down to Asuncion. It's going to be a very long run. but we're going to run full trains down there from this end, from Cusco. It'll be basically, in a very real sense, a basic city-to-city line between Cusco and Asuncion, but it will specialize in that steel coming out of Cusco. So this is an awkward one because of the way these tracks line up. In fact, watching myself play this, what I should have done is take that line that is bringing meat and now fish up that mountain to Cusco. One option would have been just delete that end of it from that tower and run it over to one of those right-hand platforms. That would have been one way to do it, but no problem, cheap bridges. So we're just going to go kind of right over the top and come out of Cusco and run way down here. You can see it's like 1,500 miles. So it's going to be like a 1,600 mile one-way trip to get down there. That's a long way. But that is preferred in my mind to trying to build a bunch of lines that work our way. You know, we could work our way down and pick up all these little towns as we go along and then build some bypasses and run the line like that. Work our way down, make some more money hauling stuff, but they're not good beer meat lines. They're all meat until you get down to one particular city down there, or town down there near Asuncion, which we'll see in a bit. It's all meat, and meat lines are just, they don't cut it unless you're doing passenger only kind of stuff. And right now, that's not what we're doing. We will, though, hint, we will be doing that a little bit later on. So now, just trying to figure out how to make this line not cost $1 billion. Right now, it's over $1 million. It's showing 1,617 miles, but we haven't even got it all the way down to Asuncion yet. We're just I'm just playing with it to see how we're going to get it done. And you can see the problem, all those mountains. So route around those mountains, that saves a ton of money. And get rid of that big, even though we have cheap bridges, we don't need to have bridges, unnecessarily. We don't need to make, 300-mile long bridges. So we're going to clean up the bridges a little bit and slowly get those costs down. And eventually, of course, we'll have a line that runs all the way down through there. And you can see that we've created the potential to, obviously, to hook other cities in there onto that line and use it as a big trunk line and hook other things in there should we choose to do so. And we will, by the way, a little bit. So there we go. That's looking pretty reasonable, 440,000 or so, 450. So that's looking pretty good. So now we can put our station in Asuncion and kind of line it back toward that track that's coming at us, and then finish off that track into the station and see what's going to cost us and gather up some funds. And now we've got ourselves a nice long, relatively straight line, relatively flat line that's going to run all the way to Asuncion. Little steep incline coming out to get over top of that first track. And again, I really should have redesigned this and lopped off the end of that existing line, moved it over to the right, and then I could have moved this line out right parallel next to it. It would have been beautiful and eliminated that slope and everything, but I wasn't quite that smart. I didn't quite have my thinking cap on to do that. And this is a good example, too, of the trade-offs between kind of the style that I like with the point-to-point connections and the more kind of, I guess we could call it, traditional way of doing it, where you set up all four of your lines to be accessible from your line with a junction and from the beginning. Now, the trade-off, though, in my mind goes like this. That junction is more flexible, and you don't have to jump through hoops like I had to do there to get the line going. However, the other side of that coin is that now you run the risk of having everybody coming up to that decision point before your junction and queuing up. And that's the thing I'm working really hard to avoid by having these point-to-point connections. And we'll see what happens when 1.7 comes out. But right now, I'm thinking I'm not going to change a whole lot. I'm going to do some experimenting with that. I'll do some videos on that new technology when it's released into production. But my thinking right now is I'm going to stay with my style of connections, even into those, even if I build some of the big fancy automatic switch stations, because of that same issue. You still get those single decision points where everybody's got to queue up, and I'm sure we can get around that. I'm sure we can come up with great ways to do it, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's a topic for another day. So now we're just accumulating some cash to build our line, and we'll get that line going, and let's move ahead a little bit. Okay, so we've got our that main line running now, city to city, between Cusco and Asuncion. And now we're going to get that ore coming in. We already did the coal. Now we're going to get that ore coming in. And I was talking about this little pass right here. So we're going to take advantage of this little pass in our bridges and build a line that's not horrible, not terrible elevation changes, some of course, and reasonable cost, and we'll work very efficiently to get our ore up to Cusco. We're going to branch off of that line that's running from Cusco down toward our our original NITR investment. And then we're going to figure out how can we get through that one mountain there, then run along this little valley with the lake, and not spend a small fortune doing that, and kind of come down through that lake or through that valley, and then go on, because that's about the same altitude as our mine, and run down in there to our ore mine. So the key, of course, is how do we get through here without creating a 38-degree incline, or without spending all the money we're going to have for the next 2.5 years. So just trying to see, now that's nice right there. You can go kind of through that pass nice and cheaply and without huge elevation changes. But we got some improvements to be made for sure right there with that. That's just because we can build cheap bridges doesn't mean we have to build giant bridges all the time. So I'm looking to see if we can't just plug it straight in instead of using even a part of that trunk line. Can we just plug it straight into a platform we would want to use for the ore? And that fourth platform is the one that's being used for the coal. Wanted to see if there was a good way to just plug it straight in and not even have to worry about the potential of any conflicts with that other line. No slowdowns, no addition to traffic, just a nice dedicated line. Because right now the most important thing in the world to us is ore delivery and coal delivery to that steel, and ultimately steel going to Asuncion. Everything else is cool. So that's our goal right now. So we're staying kind of laser focused on achieving that goal. And that doesn't look too horrible right there to cross over. But I decided that the crossover, well, actually, I've got to watch it for a minute with you here because I don't remember what I did here. How did I do that? Okay, what we're going to do is merge into the line with just sort of our standard old school merge, and then run across. So rather than building bridges here, what we're going to do is come out, and we're going to give it its own entry lane into, that makes sense, okay. Go and give it a nice big long entry lane into the station so that trains coming, queuing, and see we haven't seen, well, we're on pause, but there's not a lot of traffic here. There's no trains visible anywhere. But we're going to queue it up, fix it so that you can come in, just cross over that line and get straight over into your little queuing lane into platform 4 there. So get that tower out of the way and move it on down a little bit. There we go. And now we can connect into that lane and get over here. So sorry, I really had forgotten how I did this. Had to watch this along with you. So here we go. There we go. Now we can come off of that lane. Now we have a nice clean spot. So they come in there. There's one spot where this line's going to intersect with the line, our city-to-city line, Cusco to Ica, but not the world's biggest deal because just that one intersection. They cross each other. And so it'll be minimal, if any, slowdowns. There might never be one, but if there are, they're minimal. And we're going to be a little bit smarter about this area right here and kind of go around most of that water. And then the key, of course, is up here where we're starting to go. So we're coming up to what looks like the thinnest spot in the mountain that's more or less pointing toward where we want to go. And we'll kind of go through that area. And it takes a lot of this stuff. You have to be kind of patient. You just have to kind of play with it and see what happens if I move this, if I move that, if I scoot it down. You know, how can I get rid of the tunnels and bridges to the extent I can and not make the thing into a giant slowdown for all my trains. And it's a challenge. I mean, that's the whole point of this map, really. That's why it's called Summiteer, is that you are dealing with a lot of elevation changes, a lot of tough track building. Track building is the key here. And I'll, at the risk of repeating myself, that research for cheaper bridges and cheaper track, and then ultimately even cheaper tunnels, that's the way you want to go in your research. I think that's the biggest bang for your buck on research on this map. Regardless of the scenario or the character you're playing, is to get that research done on your tunnels and bridges and track, because that's the biggest challenge. So now we're going to get a little smarter and go around that water instead of going over it the long way. And that's fine because we can go around the water, kind of hug that mountain and not have any giant expensive track. But again, we come back to that same spot. The whole key is this area right here. How are we going to get through this mountain without spending all of our money? And there's nothing wrong, by the way, there's nothing wrong with building a decent tunnel here and spending some money on this line. If you can make this line clean and work, you will get your money back eventually as the ore keeps going. It's just the ore line itself will eventually pay for this. It's just going to take a while. And of course, any money that you spend now on one thing is money you're not spending on something else that you'd like to have. So normally I would kind of fast forward through this. It's pretty boring, but at the same time, figuring out how you're going to run these lines is crucial to this map. So let's just stick with this one. So now I've kind of decided, okay, 693,000 one way. It'll be a lot less the other way because the tunnels will get a discount because we won't have to build the tunnel again. We're just adding the second side to the tunnel. So no big deal there. So we'll just wait till we accumulate the cash. You can see our money's pretty good now, even with the maintenance we got going on. Our money's coming back, building back up pretty quickly. So we're in pretty good shape right now. There we go. Now we got one side, and we can double track it and get the ore going, and then we've got ourselves a steel industry. And we've already, of course, built out the delivery capability of that steel. And by the way, if I didn't say it before, Asuncion, the reason it's Asuncion is because there is a warehouse at Asuncion that collects steel, and it has a demand of 7 a week for steel, which is awesome. So you can ship as much steel as you want there and make really good money on it. And that's why it says ship to Asuncion. If you didn't have that warehouse, there would be nothing demanding the steel there, and you could try to ship to it. You know, we could say let's send our steel to some other city, and nobody would want it. So that's the deal there as a warehouse, and that's something we could leverage and continue to make money on, similar to the way we're doing the niter into the port warehouses that ship niter off for export. Now we've got ourselves a nice little ore line. So let's move ahead a little bit. Now I wanted to slow down here and just to make the point that you saw expanded our furniture industry. We're still building these three city clusters, both of them, and making sure that we watch them and making sure that the cities grow and to make sure that we're kind of optimizing our supply and our factories, our in-city factories and stuff, so that we can make the most money out of them possible. We know it's a hard mission. There's something going to come and get us here that's going to be really hard, and we have got to be ready for it. We've got to have a strong economy, and we want to grow these cities and make more and more and more money. The bigger the city, the more goods that get moved. So we're checking here. We can see that our log supply isn't enough for what we need. We know we've got furniture industry, we've got a paper mill, so our log demand has gone up. So we're pumping up our ability to ship logs into the warehouse, and we see there that there's plenty of logs available. There's 33 logs available to be shipped. So obviously that's a good sign that we need more trains. If we saw that there was nothing there and we had a train loading, but we were short on logs, then we would say, okay, we need to buy this industry and bump it up so that it's producing logs faster. And notice here, going to throw museums into these towns. I want these towns to keep growing. I want to keep making more and more money. See here, expanding that publishing, because that publishing can take the paper that gets created in ICA and turn it into the newspaper or magazines or whatever, and ship those back out to the other two cities. So we got three customers for it. That's kind of the heart of a three-city cluster. So we're making sure that we keep on these three-city clusters and keep them supplied and keep growing them. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that we're not just hauling steel now. We're still working the rest of our stuff. We're making sure that meat gets up there to our meat industry up in Cusco. All those kinds of things. You're just going to keep the three-city. Now, the beauty of a three-city cluster is that the organization of it, we know that any new goods that we put into a city are going to get shipped to the other two cities, so we automatically have three customers for those goods. And we're just going to keep borrowing money and keep expanding our business as fast as we can. So right here is a really good illustration of that. Remember our I'll put it in quotes this time, three-city cluster in quotes that we had down south at Santiago, Coquimbo, and Concepcion. We had, similar to the one up north, we had one meat producer and two chicha producers or beer producers. And we've got city-to-city lines going between Santiago and the other two, but we're missing one. We don't have a city-to-city line from Concepcion to Coquimbo. First of all, to begin with, they were just both chicha producers or beer producers, so a beer line isn't that great. But the thing is, now we've expanded to the point where we have other industries. We've now got, in fact, we just put that publishing business down in Concepcion, where they're going to need paper. That paper is up in being created up in this cluster in Coquimbo. So we've got to have that city-to-city line in this design in order to move that paper down to Concepcion to the publisher, and to move the published goods up to Coquimbo. So by adding this one line right here, now we've got a true city-to-city cluster, because we have city-to-city lines. We have two city-to-city, 1, 2, 3 city-to-city lines connecting all of the cities in all the combinations. So any city can move goods directly to the other two cities in the cluster. So we'll get that done and have ourselves a true 3-city cluster down here, which is going to help all 3 cities grow. All right, so we're about to get our message that our steel has finished shipping to Asunción. So you can see here, we've kept these cities growing nicely. We've got 2 very efficient, successful 3-city clusters. There we got our message. Now we move on, and it's telling us, I'm sorry, we've got our, here it is, there it is, sorry, I was ahead of myself. Here's the message that tells us we've delivered that steel down to Asunción. So we're going to hang on here a minute and see what our next tasks are.
Then, of course, a possible takeover attempt will be more difficult.
And he's going to start giving us the new task, and unfortunately I'm finishing them so fast, like $55 million company value, we already got it, so we're done with that one. We got to send automobiles down to Buenos Aires, 20 automobiles to Buenos Aires. In Buenos Aires, there's a warehouse that exports automobiles. So we got this beautiful demand down there. We need to start supplying it. And so that's going to be, and we got to buy out all of our competitors and have 4 cities of 125,000. Now, the interesting thing is that's actually the hardest task, but we're in great shape here to handle all that. So please join us for our next episode when we go into the automobile business and start working on taking out our competitors. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.